I've always considered myself an ordinary person, or at least I thought I was. My day would start early, just like anyone else's. The alarm clock's sound cut through the silence of my morning, a mechanical routine marked by quick coffees, exchanges glances with my still drowsy wife, and the constant hum of the news on TV in the background. Life seemed to follow a predictable pace, too safe, with its small dramas and bland joys. It was the kind of routine that, even when tiring, gave a sense of stability, a certain illusion of control. My home, my job, my circle of friends, all pieces of a puzzle that seemed complete, yet secretly held invisible cracks. I carried with me a bag of inner doubts, that subtle feeling that there is more, something beyond my understanding, always just out of reach of a sharper glance. In silent moments, I sometimes found myself pondering mortality, that hidden fear we all avoid. Like a shadow lurking in the background, invisible until a crisis, a scare, or a loss suddenly brings to light how fragile what I considered secure really was. That day, just like many others, I walked to work with the same hurried steps, my mind full of thoughts. The morning passed normally until an unexpected episode started unfolding. A sudden pain, like a dagger stabbing my chest, came out of nowhere, slicing through my peace. A cruel dizziness took over me, and suddenly, the world around me began to sway like an old tape about to tear. My heart pounded wildly. Anxiety turned into terror. Life, which until then seemed so solid, started to dissolve before my eyes. I felt everything slipping through my hands, along with my grasp of reality. It was as if I was watching the facade of my existence fade away, revealing something nameless, a silent, powerful presence manifesting in its purest form, and threat, a hope, all at once. At that moment, the thin line between what is real and what is tangible started to vanish. My routine, that routine of someone who thinks they control their own life, became a distant memory, a dream I might never wake from again. That day, a peculiar feeling began to form, almost like a vibration that refused to fade, a silent warning growing stronger. My body, which had seemed so steady just moments before, now showed signs of unexpected weakness. A sensation of heaviness in my muscles, a persistent dizziness that seemed to deepen, as if my own energies were slowly being drained. But I chose to ignore it, brushing aside the small pains, thinking it was just passing. Stress, fatigue that would go away. However, as the day advanced, other signs intensified. Cold sweat started trickling down my back, even without any change in the room's temperature. My heartbeat became irregular, pounding hard and uneven, as if hammering inside my head. Each breath became an effort, as if the air was heavier, denser than before. An ever-growing unease set in, as if an invisible force was testing my own resistance, pushing limits I didn't even know I had. Conversations around me seemed to turn into distant echoes. My thoughts, once clear, now blurred as if a fog was beginning to cloud my mind. I started feeling a little anxiety, a feeling that can't be fully explained, only felt. Something whispering deep down. Something isn't right. A seed of fear started to sprout, a silent worry that grew in my throat, while my eyes involuntarily fixated on the window of my room, trying to find a way out of this feeling of losing control. That was when I realized my warning signs were obvious, almost shouting, but my mind stubbornly refused to listen. It's just fatigue, I told myself, trying to rationalize the situation. Maybe it was stress, or just a simple indisposition. But in my body's silence, a different voice whispered, a whisper that said the opposite. That life, so predictable, and controlled until then, could slip away from me at any moment. And that doubt planted itself deep in my memory, a seed of fear that would grow far beyond what I could imagine. It all happened in the blink of an eye, in a moment that seemed to stretch into an eternity and yet pass like lightning. I was in my living room, sitting in a chair, when that sensation of heaviness turned into something more concrete, more agonizing. My whole body seemed to tighten, as if something inside me was twisting to escape. A sudden, sharp pain, piercing my chest with brutal force, made me shiver, and before I could understand what was happening, what once appeared to be a simple episode became an avalanche. The dizziness intensified, a vortex where everything spun into a whirlpool. The sounds around me distorted, like an old recording, noises blending with my racing heartbeat. My body began to feel empty, a sensation of nothingness, a radical lightness, as if I was being pulled out of myself, into a space without shape, without limits, where everything was a mixture of light, shadow, and absolute silence. The air grew charged, almost electric, and this feeling of departure was both frightening and irresistible. Suddenly, a faint light started forming on the horizon of my vision, like a spark, the first hint of what was to come. A shiver ran down my spine, a mixture of fear and fascination. My consciousness fought against it, yet seemed too weak to resist the inevitable. The vision expanded, dilating as if the universe was absorbing itself into a single spark of hope or condemnation. The pain in my chest grew stronger, like an internal wound throbbing fiercely, as everything inside me played out in a silent farewell. A farewell I couldn't understand at that moment, but somehow felt was the beginning of something incomprehensible. I felt my essence detach from my body, a sense of freedom and extreme fear all at once. My spirit, if I can still call it that, seemed to be floating, traversing a strange space made of undulating shadows and soft lights, pulsating with a silent energy too profound to be described. My physical body remained motionless while that which was my soul, or whatever it was, crossed an invisible line, a border between the familiar and the absolute mystery. The scene seemed unreal, as if projected by an invisible force, a transition between the tangible world and a dimension that defies all human logic. And at that moment, I realized everything I knew, my entire story, was about to change forever. The great doubt, perhaps never really a doubt until then, began to form. Am I leaving or being taken? Is this ending or a new beginning? The answer hid behind a veil of darkness, but the feeling that something extraordinary was happening was impossible to deny. In the silence that followed, all that remained was the certainty that my existence would never be the same. As my body seemed to float uncontrollably, an avalanche of emotions crashed into my consciousness. It was like an unstoppable internal storm, a chaotic mixture of fear, hope, and a strange sense of surrender. My heart, now pounding at full throttle, was trying to escape my chest, each beat more frenetic as the proximity of the unknown became vividly felt, an almost physical sensation that something vast, beyond human understanding, was about to happen. My mind spun desperately, trying to find an answer, a logical explanation, a way out of this absurd experience. But all I met was silence, a complete absence of words, only an overwhelming presence of emotions colliding and mixing, the primal fear of vanishing, of losing everything I was, and simultaneously a quiet hope of discovering some answer, some meaning. Despair was as dense as hope, two opposing forces fighting within me, creating an emotional pain as tangible as the pain in my chest. Fear, in turn, became something almost tangible, an entity of its own. A sensation that everything could dissolve at any moment, that the life I knew was an illusion ready to shatter like a broken mirror. Vulnerability emerged strongly, a feeling of exposure before something greater and unavoidable, an invisible judgment, a presence observing, perhaps deciding my fate. My body wavered, as if the very strength of my soul was being tested, a silent struggle between the will to stay and the urgency to escape. At the same time, a faint hope arose amidst this emotional chaos. Like a faint light in darkness, an inner voice tried to whisper that everything made sense, that this was just a passage, a step in a learning process. But doubt was unforgiving. Will I return? Is escaping this limbo even possible? Or was this my final destiny? These questions consumed me, while the cold down my spine grew almost unbearable. A feeling that my life somehow was hanging by, an invisible thread threatening to snap at any moment. And as this inner conflict vibrated within me, I realized that the only certainty at that moment was that my soul, or whatever was there, was experiencing its greatest transition. A mix of terror and hope hammered in my chest, like a symphony of emotions whose meaning I couldn't understand, yet it seemed to define the boundary between life and death. And in that instant, everything became a mystery, an enigma that stubbornly refused to be solved. The only truth I knew for sure was that nothing could be more real than what I was feeling, an emotion that, no matter how much I tried to hide it, invaded every fiber of my being. Everything seemed to be heading toward a point of no return. The sensation that my essence was detaching from my physical body grew stronger, almost like a tangible force pulling my soul along an invisible thread. It was as if I were on a height, a precipice, where the ground beneath my feet was slowly dissolving, and an invisible bridge was forming in front of me. There was no longer any room for doubt. This was the final instant, the line that separates staying here or moving beyond. My mind desperately tried to cling to whatever remaining rationality I had, but with every passing second, that anchor grew weaker. The darkness around me seemed to close in, slowly swallowing the last remnants of my earthly consciousness. I felt a shiver crawling down my spine, a chill originating from deep within my being, an overwhelming sensation of total opening, as if all the borders of my existence were being explored and simultaneously dissolved. At that moment, everything accelerated in a nearly agonizing rhythm. An inner force seemed to push me outward, a narrative beyond my control, a feeling of being pulled by an invisible current that did not originate from the physical world. Like a sigh, an ancient breath, from a universe I do not fully understand, a burst of energy sliced through my consciousness. It was as if my entire life, with all its emotions, pains, and fears, had been compressed into a single instant. A flash of light and shadow, marking the beginning of a journey that could only be described as an eternal transition. The sensation of emptiness, silence, and simultaneous movement overwhelmed me. My body, for a moment, seemed exactly what I had always feared. A specter, a shadow, a memory of what I once was. The light, the purest light, now became the sole focus, either a spark of hope or a sign of condemnation. And there, on that threshold, I felt an intoxicating mixture of fear and fascination, a silent farewell coupled with an expectant anticipation of what would come next. It was as if a door was slowly closing, leaving me on the brink of something immeasurable, something that, in some way, promised to reveal the greatest secrets of the universe, or to hide them forever. When my essence was finally released from my body, it was like plunging into a pool of pure energy. The sensation was of a sudden, almost violent movement, and force pulling me into a different state of existence, a freedom I had never experienced in my physical life. My physical body remained there, immobile, like an empty shell, while my perception expanded into a dimension that seemed infinitely beyond time and space. During that moment of release, a diffuse, brilliant light began to pulsate around me, a light that seemed to breathe with a life of its own. It wasn't an ordinary light, but a luminous vibration resonating within my soul, filling every fiber of my being with an absolute sense of calm, even as my heart continued to beat uncontrollably in my mind. I heard the gentle sound of a silent symphony, a tone that had no origin, yet vibrated within me as if every particle of the universe was whispering its own secret. It was a feeling of being in a space between silence and melody, between the infinite and the microcosm of human emotions. My physical body seemed to distort, a shadow drifting farther away, as my consciousness expanded as if wrapped by this light that broke the boundaries of what we call reality. Every color, every shimmer, seemed more alive than in ordinary life. Shades of deep blue, violet, and gold blending in a cosmic dance that could only be perceived by a soul momentarily escaping the shackles of the physical world. I perceived a sense of clarity so intense that it seemed to penetrate the core of everything. Where I came from, where I was going, the purpose of all that we call life. In that instant, I felt as if I were gazing through an indelibly beautiful window, an opportunity to glimpse beyond the veil, to understand the essence of existence, even if just for a brief, eternal moment. It was like a dream made of light, an experience that sliced through the air with a silent force, leaving me completely vulnerable, a vulnerability that paradoxically brought an indescribable peace, a peace my words could never fully express. It was a liberation, an awakening, and at the same time, an anticipation of what was yet to come. As soon as my consciousness left my body, everything around me began to transform in a way that defied any attempt at logical description. The environment, if we can call it that, had no beginning and no end. It was an expanse of vibrant, pulsating colors that intertwined in a silent dance of shades no human eye could fully grasp. The colors were not static. They vibrated, rippled, as if each had its own breath. Electric blues mingled with deep reds and shimmering golds that spread like living flames, almost like a cosmic painting made of pure light. Sounds, if they could be called that, vibrated from within me, a whispered melody, a vibration that at times resembled a hymn, and at other moments, a distant, almost eerie laughter, as if the universe was speaking to me in a primitive, primal language only my soul could understand. These sounds had no clear physical origin, yet they seemed to reverberate through my core, echoing in the eternity of a space without a sense of time or space. It was as if I were listening to the very breath of the cosmos, intertwined with an orchestra of emotions my mind still struggled to decipher, a mixture of calm and terror. The distortions that played before my senses were unsettling. Light and colors seemed to morph, changing their forms in an almost psychedelic manner. A sacred geometry, undulating, expanding, contracting, as if the universe itself was toying with my perception. Everything appeared to be part of a continuous dance of creation and destruction, of birth and death, a kind of spiritual cleansing where all was dissolving into its purest essence. My body, which in everyday life was a symbol of identity, became nothing more than an insignificant point on this stage of light and sound. In this space, emotions roared with full force, a mixture of fear at losing control, fascination with the intoxicating beauty, and a strange feeling of belonging to something greater, a connection to an energy that was both welcoming and terrifying. It was a moment when everything turned, liquid and malleable, a vivid dream where my sensations multiplied beyond what physics can permit. I perceived in the depths of this experience that everything I saw and heard carried an intention, a silent message, almost like a warning, or a hidden revelation, waiting for my understanding. In this state of expansion and sensory chaos, my mind began to turn inward, seeking connections, a bridge between what I was experiencing and what I knew as my own life. Memories surfaced with an almost painful intensity. Every moment I had lived, every decision, every regret or joy appeared with astonishing clarity, as if I were watching a film where I was both the protagonist and the audience. But this vision was unlike anything I knew. It was a deep connection with the very essence of everything, a feeling that my emotions were part of a greater web, intertwined with the universe. Yet, a doubt persisted. a silent questioning that could not be ignored. If all this was an experience of death or a journey beyond life, what did it really mean? This multiplicity of colors, sounds, and shapes seemed like a mirror to my own soul, reflecting my doubts, fears, and hopes. I saw myself there, vulnerable, exposed to the revelation that my existence was only a tiny piece in an infinitely larger mechanism. There was a sharp feeling of fragility, as if my identity was slowly dissolving into the vastness of the universe, eroding my certainties, my deepest truths, my most intimate memories. I questioned, who am I, after all? What would be left of me in the face of all this? Every doubt felt like a weight, an anchor trying to pull my soul back to reality. But there was no answer. Only a silent presence, a calm that listened to my thoughts, my vulnerability. Even though the connection was profound, it also brought a sense of isolation, as if my essence was touching something bigger, something that could never be fully understood or reached. My entire existence evaded clarity, and I wondered if this eternal doubt was part of the process itself, a kind of inevitable cycle of seeking and resisting in the face of a mystery that can never be fully revealed. The experience had silently taught me that life and death are a continuum of questions without definitive answers, a journey of insecurity and hope intertwined, a truth that seemed clearer than ever in that moment. The transition into the celestial realm was like passing through an invisible door, a membrane of energy that gently rippled and parted before me. A vibrant, pulsating light spread everywhere, an explosion of brightness that seemed to touch every fiber of my being. The darkness that had previously enveloped me gave way to a frantic vibration of colors, deep blues, brilliant violets, and glowing golds, intertwining in a dance of expansion and contraction. It was a vibration I not only saw, but began to feel. Each hue, each movement, as if it were a cosmic breath. All around me, the energy seemed to breathe, pulsating at a frequency that touched my soul in a nearly painfully beautiful way. This sensation carried me beyond physical understanding, into a dimension where time itself did not exist, only the presence of a vibrant, incomprehensible force. It was as if a wave of pure light was tearing through the fabric of the universe, cradling me in a sense of infinity, of everything and nothing all at once. That space resembled a vast expanse of sacred geometry, where shapes formed and deformed in synchronized motions. An absolute order seemed to prevail, patterns being created and destroyed every second, like an encrypted message trying to communicate beyond words. Among these lines of energy, I perceived beings emanating their own light, figures that could not be defined by human shapes. They resembled symbols of universal energies, forms of consciousness quietly wandering, specters of something greater. The feeling of reverence and fear intertwined, creating a sense of standing before something that transcends any human concept of divinity. And then, everything became even more surreal. A mirage of celestial landscapes, of planes seemingly made, of concentrated pure energy, where my spirit floated, lost in this arena of light and shadow. It was like being inside a cosmic dream, where each second could unveil a new truth, or simply dissolve us into the vast silence with no answers. As I moved further into the vastness of this unknown dimension, I began to notice figures emerging among the luminous energy, as if fragments of an intelligence that surpasses human understanding. These entities of light had no fixed shapes, yet radiated a presence that illuminated the entire space around me, a warm, welcoming, almost hypnotic light that pulsed with an unsettling gentleness. Their outlines were blurred, but their expressions emanated a silent strength, a kind of ancient wisdom vibrating at the very core of everything that lived there. They did not speak with words, but conveyed messages through emotions and sensations. I saw their forms as incandescent silhouettes, constantly shifting in shape and intensity. Sometimes they took on human figures, other times, abstract symbols of sacred geometry. It was as if they were telling me that all of existence unfolds in a silence heavy with meaning. I felt a mixture of reverence, fear, and a strange consolation. Because even in their enigmatic appearance, these figures invited a profound understanding. Here, there was no judgment, only an invitation to silent comprehension. Their presences were like a warm breeze in the vastness, touching my essence with unparalleled softness. One of them, a being that seemed larger and more intense than the others, approached me without being seen. A shadow of light, a figure pulsating with greater strength, radiating a feeling that all of this was a reflection of my own consciousness. In this instant connection, I felt they held the answer to my deepest doubts. Yet the language would never be enough to fully express it all. It was a communication from soul to soul, a transfer of emotions that pierced me in a way that seemed to tear down the barriers of time and space. The feeling was that these beings of light were custodians of ancient secrets, of knowledge kept, hidden in the vastness of the universe, waiting for someone willing to understand, even if only for fleeting moments. It was an experience of reverence, a moment when I realized that my doubts and fears were being embraced by energies I could never fully comprehend, yet whose silence carried the weight of all hidden truth within the infinite. Suddenly, at the heart of that realm of pure energy, a distinct form began to emerge. A structure pulsating with its own light, a portal unveiling itself before me with an irresistibly compelling force. It was like an opening of sacred geometry, a border between the known and the unknown, manifesting as a blend of flowing curves and straight lines intertwined, forming a core of energy that seemed alive, breathing. Its presence was overwhelming, a mixture of mystery and beauty, a threshold that seemed to prevent everything from dissolving into the endless vastness all around me. The colors surrounding the portal vibrated intensely, as if imbued with their own purpose. Shades of emerald green, sky blue, and crystalline white, all woven into patterns that expanded and contracted like cosmic breaths. This sacred geometry had a hypnotic effect, almost unbearable, drawing me into a sensation of standing before a primordial truth of the universe. It was as if the portal was a secret passage, a frame holding secrets that transcend any human logic, a boundary separating the vastness of existence from worlds that perhaps should not even be perceivable to us. The space around it vibrated, in a silence heavy with expectation, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting to reveal what lay beyond these unimaginable borders. I felt the pull of an invisible, pulsating energy, drawing me to explore this liminal edge, even knowing that doing so might mean I would never return to what we call reality. My heart pounded fiercely, my thoughts raced, while a powerful mix of fascination and fear roared inside me. Is this where the door opens? Is this where everything ends or begins? That boundary seemed to symbolize both power and mystery, a signature of the universe, a mark from where everything is born, transforms, and vanishes. The sense that I was standing before something sacred, a portal to eternity, was so intense it almost felt tangible. My spirit reached outward, stretching to this limit, aware that crossing that invisible line would lead to a journey beyond, full understanding. Something inside me whispered that this is the core of the mystery, a threshold guarding the universe's greatest secrets. And yet, despite its veiled enigma, it remains irresistible and essential for understanding who we are, where we come from, and where we are headed. Before that magical portal, a silent battle unfolded within me. The desire to cross, to immerse myself in the very core of that universe of light, seemed an irresistible force, a chance to discover the ultimate truth, to understand the meaning of everything. I felt the presence of immense beauty, a peace that transcends anything I had known in life, wrapping me in a sensation of absolute belonging. Yet at the same time, an opposing force manifested. A whispering voice, almost audible in every fiber of my being, pleaded for me to remain. Not a voice, but a sensation that I needed to turn back, that my journey wasn't over yet. There was anguish within my soul, a cruel doubt. Could I stay? I wished to remain forever in this space of light and silence, knowing that beyond it lay something that could unravel all my questions. Time seemed to stand still, each second stretching endlessly as the thin line between my desire to stay and my need to return became harder to decide. It was as if my emotions were being pulled by two opposing forces, one yearning for eternity, the other demanding I go back, even as my soul longed to unveil the infinite. The feeling of being in a limbo between two worlds carried a mix of fascination and terror. Part of me yearned to plunge into the boundlessness, to uncover the secrets hidden in the universe's depths, while another, quieter, wiser part insisted it was not the moment to stay. My tasks, our lessons of life here on Earth, had not yet been completed. It was an unresolved choice, a feeling of being caught between the desire to lose myself in eternity and the instinct to return to mortal limitations. The doubt whispered, "Let yourself go, dive into the light, or come back, to remember, to live, to suffer again." And at that moment, I understood that this dilemma was not just a fleeting doubt. It embodied the very essence of human experience, the eternal conflict between the desire for transcendence and the fear of losing everything that defines us in this physical world. Somehow, the decision already seemed dictated by the mystery of existence itself. Those who venture into eternity never quite return the same way. And this silent, terrifying certainty lingered with me. A reminder that, no matter how much we seek to understand the grandeur, there are moments when we must choose between staying or returning. Suddenly, within that space of light and sacred geometry, an unexpectedly powerful presence materialized before me. It was not an ordinary human figure, but a form of pure energy pulsing with an omnipresent light, an essence that seemed to vibrate at the deepest frequency of my soul. Its presence radiated a comforting warmth, yet also a force that instinctively stirred in me an awe that was almost terrifying. This was an entity that transcended any concept of divinity I had known in life, a consciousness that felt both ancient and eternal, composed of multiple forms of energy that constantly reconfigured themselves. No words were spoken. Only a transfer of emotions and sensations connected us instantly. My heart seemed to leap out of my chest as I felt an immense curiosity, a desire to understand, and at the same time, a humbling sense of vulnerability in front of everything. The communication wasn't limited to sounds or images. It was a direct transmission of essence, a kind of dialogue from soul to soul, where every feeling and thought blended into a mutual understanding. I sensed as if it were reading my deepest intentions, my doubts, my longings, and even my hidden fears. A wave of peace enveloped me, but at the same time, an inquietude arose, a quiet fear that this entity might judge my soul. The presence seemed there to show me something, to reveal a sacred part of the universe, a connection unspoken, only to be experienced by those standing face to face with the infinite in that very instant. In its presence, everything that seemed separate dissolved, and a vertiginous flood of emotion swept over me. Recognition, reverence, fear, hope. It was like a conversation made of emotions, a silent exchange that even without words carried the weight of eternity. There was no need for explanations. It simply was. A manifestation of an intelligence beyond human comprehension, a meeting that would leave deep marks, a bridge between who we are and who we can become, in the purest silence of the universe. In that space of light and energy, visions began to unfold like scenes from an ancient film, projected onto my mind in a way that felt both real and surreal simultaneously. A rapid, flowing sequence of images emerged. Memories of lives I'd never lived, places I'd never known, encounters that seemed to form a mosaic of my soul, accumulated across eras. Each scene carried a sense of familiarity, even though I couldn't grasp its immediate meaning. It was as if my existence was a river flowing through a labyrinth of invisible channels, each branch revealing fragments of a greater truth. I realized that my identity was an accumulation of multiple lives, experiences that extended beyond time and space. These visions appeared fleeting, some carrying pain and regret, others radiating love and redemption, as if my soul was walking along a bridge of light, connected to everything I had been and everything I could still become. The prevailing feeling was that death, in that universe, wasn't an end, but a passage, a transformation that merely changed the form of my existence, while my essence persisted beyond anything I could imagine. At the same time, I glimpsed future, possibilities, delicate, terrifying scenarios, like glimpses of paths not yet taken but already present, waiting for my attention. It was a vision that death was the beginning of a cycle, a never-ending renewal, and that everything had a purpose, a journey of learning, pain, and love that never truly finished, even beyond the veil of life. The mystery deepened. No matter how my senses expanded, or how my understanding tried to embrace this truth, it remained shrouded in a fog of beauty and terror. It was like peering into a miniature universe, carrying the secret of the entire cosmos. One that revealed, at once, both its grandeur and its insignificance in the face of a higher wisdom. There, between fear and fascination, I realized that the true essence of existence was something beyond reason, a puzzle that can only be lived, never fully explained. Suddenly, the feeling of stability dissolved like a shattered mirror, and a wind of uncertainty swept across that vast expanse of light and energy. What once seemed like a journey of discovery now revealed a haunting truth. Everything there was, temporary. Shapes, colors, entities, even the very fabric of the cosmos unfolding before me, pulsed, transformed, evolved in an eternal dance of creation and destruction. A sense of disorientation took hold, as if I were watching a fleeting theater performance, a spectacle meant to vanish as soon as the audience left the stage. A feeling of decay set in, a perception that the universe is neither rigid nor permanent, but a constant flow of energy moving beyond my comprehension. My presence, once almost immutable, now seemed minuscule before a greater force that absorbed, devoured, and renewed everything. The thought that my soul could be swallowed by this immense wheel of time sent a visceral shiver down my spine. With a seed of fear, I realized that my existence here was but a drop in an ocean of endless change, that all of this was an illusion of permanence. In that moment, a subtle awareness warned me that my fleeting freedom might turn into prison if I tried to deny this truth. The beauty of that flow of transformation concealed a cruel warning. Control is an illusion. Everything that exists, from the stars to our very lives, is eternally in motion, constantly changing, passing from one state to another, with no guarantees or promises. In this moment of revelation, an acute vulnerability seized me, as if I were standing on the edge of a bottomless abyss, an alert that my own existence was transient, that even my essence was fleeting in the face of the vastness of time. In profound silence, an ambiguous peace enveloped my essence as I realized I was being evaluated. There was no human judgment, no explicit blame or condemnation, only a presence that seemed to examine my soul with invisible, attentive, penetrating eyes. It was a disconcerting feeling, a mixture of mercy and severity, where everything I had done and everything I had left undone appeared weighed upon a silent cosmic scale of judgment. I sensed that my actions, my words, my ways of loving and hurting, everything, was passing through a kind of spiritual sieve, an assessment that felt more merciful than punitive, yet no less definitive. I saw myself as small before this greater force, unable to escape its silent gaze, its invisible judgment. the sense of vulnerability deepened. There, in that space beyond time, I perceived that my existence, no matter how insignificant, carried weight on the scale of eternity. The fear of the unknown merged with the hope of mercy. This moment was one of absolute reflection, a kind of internal judgment where my conscience faced the possibility of forgiveness or condemnation without knowing which one was truly right. The silence of this evaluation seemed to last an eternity, as my soul confronted its own truths and lies, moments of courage and weakness. What haunted me most was the idea that, even in its infinite mercy, something there revealed that my journey was not yet finished, that there was still something to resolve, that my essence was a seed needing to grow, mature, or perhaps to be lost forever. In that space, I saw that divine mercy was not a reward, but a force of deep reflection, an opportunity for redemption and self-awareness. And yet, the emptiness of the mystery persisted. Why was all this necessary? And for whom? Those questions remained suspended in the vastness, as my soul desperately sought an answer that surely would never be fully revealed. Suddenly, a deeper vibration took over everything around me. It was as if a vast force of pure energy was entering me, enveloping me in an unlimited fusion. There was no separation anymore. My essence merged with a consciousness that seemed to fill the universe. An overwhelming sense of absolute understanding flooded me, as if all the questions I carried unraveled into a single silent answer, accessible only through a moment of total fusion. It was like becoming a particle of a greater energy, an extension of something I could never name. The entire universe seemed to harmonize through that sensation, a union of beings, thoughts, and knowledge that wholly escaped my words. I was no longer an observer, but part of a consciousness that knew and felt everything. The fullness was vast, yet terrifying, and certainty that we are part of a greater force. But I also sensed that this force had its boundaries, its invisible borders, beyond which all became unknown. The feeling of union was intertwined with a shadow of fear, because at that moment, I realized that the ego, the individuality, could be lost in this ocean of energy. The fusion pulled me toward complete surrender, a relinquishment that brought both infinite peace and the anguish of potentially losing myself in the infinite. It was the purest expression of connection and solidarity, a gathering of souls that became one. An experience of fullness that paradoxically carried the shadow of the unknown, an awareness that, in that instant, I might forever dissolve my limits and merge with eternity, or be elevated to a state of understanding only a few can dream of. In that moment, I understood that the true essence of existence is a constant quest for that fusion, for that greater knowing, even though this journey also carries a deep fear of losing one's identity in the boundless ocean of the cosmos. Thus, between ecstasy and terror, I realized how union with that greater consciousness was the summit of mystery, a connection that defies all logic, all hope, and all comprehension. As everything seemed to melt into the vastness of light and energy, a voice, or rather, a deep, unwavering certainty, resounded silently within me. It was a warning that, more than words, carried the weight of a truth I had carried throughout my journey. There is no escape, no way to break free from the cycle. All of this, each contact, each revelation, every experience, led to one inevitable conclusion. The journey is unavoidable, and naturally, we always return to where we truly belong. It felt as if an invisible force was marking that destiny, within my soul. A whispering message carried on a vibration that crossed my entire being. You may try to run, hide, deny, all of it. But the truth is that everything is part of a greater plan. The voyage doesn't end here, nor does it truly ever end. It is a continuity, an eternal cycle repeating itself. A road that always leads back to the starting point. the sensation that my existence was a piece of a larger puzzle, a piece that could never truly be destroyed, only reenacted, came with a mixture of fear and calm. I knew that this truth carried a promise. Whoever crosses the threshold, even if they wish to escape, always ends up returning or moving forward into new cycles, new experiences, new questions that never find final answers. It was a revelation, imbued with an acceptance, an inner voice whispering that everything this universe has is part of its own destiny, a lesson we all, inevitably, must learn. In that moment, I also perceived an opportunity for liberation, the understanding that accepting the cycle is, in fact, a way of transcending it, that the fear of being unable to escape is merely an illusion, because true freedom resides in recognizing that everything is part of that infinite flow. The cycle, the destiny, the eternity, all unfold as a greater mercy, a journey that never truly ends, only transforms and renews us, guiding us back to the primordial silence where it all began. Suddenly, everything returned in a brutal and unexpected rush. Like lightning tearing through darkness, my consciousness was pulled back into my physical body. It was like an electric shock, a jolt that cut through my soul and matter simultaneously. The sensation was of a colossal, almost violent force, tearing me away from that dimension of light, sound, energy, and mystery, bringing me back to the tangible world, while my body stubbornly refused to accept this new reality. The first thing I noticed was the weight, a crushing pressure pressing down on my entire body, as if my structure was being compressed by an invisible load. My muscles ached, my heart raced wildly, and a sharp pain in my chest sliced through the air like a razor. The scene around me appeared brutally vivid. The quartz, the colors, the human forms, all seemed charged with an overwhelming intensity, as if my senses had been hyperactivated, overloaded by an avalanche of information. The feeling of being awake, after a near-death experience, was like a collision of realities, one crashing against my soul. My brain tried to process the distance between that universe of light and this world of flesh and bones, where everything felt fragile, ordinary, and mortal. Every breath was an effort, both pain and joy intertwined in the knowledge that I was still here, even as I knew that everything could change in an instant. It was a state of absolute confusion, a clash of dimensions, emotions, and senses, an uneasy mix of deep fear, reverence, and almost disbelief, and almost what had been a journey beyond time now turned into a struggle to cling to the physical realm, as my emotions fought to understand what had just transpired. The impact was so sudden and powerful that I felt as if my soul had been shattered and hastily stitched back together, an act of desperation to stay conscious, aware that my life had been touched by something that could never be fully defined. When I opened my eyes, everything around me seemed strange, like a distant memory of a dream that was trying to slip away. Every detail, every movement, felt awkward, as if my mind was still adjusting to this new reality. I sensed the resistance of the flesh, the weight of my body, the physical sensations that years of routine had made so familiar now appeared heavy and unreal. My brain struggled to understand. Where was I? What had happened to me? How could I return to this world of flesh and bones after such a profound journey? Emotions churned within me, a turbulent mix of disbelief, relief, fear, and a quiet sadness that everything might be fleeting. Doubts balanced on a knife's edge, while a sense of loss hovered, losing something that, even without words, had been more real and intense than any previous experience. Every part of my consciousness fought to accept the reality I had just left, trying to piece together a puzzle of conflicting emotions. The effort to reconnect with the daily routine brought a harsh realization. My understanding of life, death, time, and space had been radically altered. With every movement, every breath, it was as if I was undergoing an internal reconstruction. a desperate attempt to fit together a puzzle that seemed incomplete, with pieces too impotent to fill the sea. Vast gaps. My mind searched for explanations for the inexplicable. Fragments of memories, flashes of that dimension of light and silence that felt more like a dream, or perhaps a deeper truth beyond what I could imagine. The routine slowly reestablished itself, but the feeling of limbo persisted, a subtle shadow that refused to dissipate. I could see that, despite being back in my physical life, that experience had now become a part of me, a seed planted deep within my soul, a new reality that needed to be integrated, raising questions about the true meaning of it all. While I silently struggled to keep my emotions in check, aware that my life would never be entirely the same again. Sitting here, in the quiet of my own home, I realized that a new vision of the world has taken shape within me. What I experienced, the contact with a dimension of light, energy beings, a universe of mysteries beyond comprehension, has left indelible marks on my soul. There is no denying it anymore. My perspective on life, death, and everything that exists has changed forever. It's as if I've been granted a lens that reveals the deepest layers of the universe's essence, a perception that, no matter how I try to explain, will always feel incomplete. This experience has awakened a silent understanding that we are, above all, spiritual beings living a material experience, and that existence does not end with physical death. What once seemed like philosophy or belief now has become a visceral certainty inside me, a truth I will carry for a lifetime. I know that my mortality is an illusion, a passing veil covering a greater reality, an infinity of possibilities intertwined in the eternal cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Despite all the beauty and mystery I have encountered, I also bear a responsibility to share this understanding, to question my own beliefs, and to live more consciously and serenely, knowing that everything is transient. This new perspective has not brought fear of death, but has instead ignited a sense of urgency to live more genuinely, with deeper love and with profound gratitude for the present, despite how fragile and fleeting it all seems. Though these moments were shrouded in frightening mysteries, they also revealed a peaceful truth, that ultimately, everything we have been, are, and will be, is part of something greater, an eternal story we are only beginning to understand. And now, with this expanded vision, I move forward, carrying within my soul a light that will never go out, even in the darkest darkness.